Thank you so much for taking the time to share with us today. How are you doing today?
Good. Hi, Savannah. How are you? How's everyone? Good to see you. Sorry I can't be there in person. I really enjoyed seeing the Entrepreneur Center a couple of years ago when I had a chance to visit campus, pre-COVID, when life was different then.
Yeah, it's great to have you back with us. So with that, why don't we start from the beginning? Growing up, what were kind of your interests and how did you see that shaping the entrepreneurial side of your future self?
Well, I grew up in Virginia in a small town in the Shenandoah Valley, Winchester, Virginia, which isn't so small anymore. Back in the dark ages when I lived there, it was pretty small. I think the one thing that I certainly never expected I'd have a career in business or more of an entrepreneurial career in a big established company. When I look back, I think the things that may have prepared me, perhaps the biggest thing was just curiosity and the ability to explore and discover. I had parents that allowed me to do that. My mother was a teacher, but especially by the time I got to high school, I had one teacher, a guy named Mr. David Larrick, who was incredibly helpful and started a humanities class for us in a public high school that really stoked my imagination and my curiosity. And I think a big part of entrepreneurship is the ability, you've got it in your pillars, it's the ability to discover, to get out in the world and kind of learn for yourself and let your curiosity take you to find things, to solve problems. And so I would say that, and then probably just good imaginative play. I mean, I was part of a neighborhood pack and we had so much fun when I was young. And I think those two things, the ability to collaborate and work with a team and be curious, I think really helped me later in life.
Yeah, that's awesome. I've already heard a lot of our pillars of entrepreneurial thinking at play in your story, like opportunity discovery, like you mentioned, and collaboration. But moving on from there and into your time at William and Mary, how did you kind of see that shape your personal and professional journey?
Well, I mean, William and Mary was such, college is just such a formative time for anyone. William and Mary, for me, I think one, just a great liberal arts education. The classes now 30 plus years later, when I look back, the classes that I loved the most seemingly had little to prepare me for the future, but they really did. I mean, classes like anthropology. I mean, I was a biology major, as you pointed out. But yet I was afforded the opportunity to learn about a wide range of subjects, to go a lot of different places. So I think that theme of curiosity and discovery played out very strongly when I was at William and Mary. I think also I was able to sort of build those early, what became sort of start to build early that thread that became an important thread for me in my career, and that is around storytelling. While I was a biology major, I thought I was going to go to medical school, and by about junior year, I was like, no, I don't see myself doing that. What I really want to be is a science journalist. I want to tell stories about science. It was hard at the time. I mean, the college was smaller. It hasn't lost its liberal arts edge, but it was more siloed, and it was hard as a biology major to get into more English or science by the time or writing by the time I had that sort of epiphany for myself. So I found an internship at the public radio station in Norfolk, and I think that was very helpful to me. I had a great mentor there, but just sort of started that early development in the power of story. And that's something I've carried with me. I mean, I set out my first early jobs were reporter. I wasn't very good. Then I quickly went behind the scenes. But the one thread I've pulled all the way through is that of storytelling. And I think it's really important to put it in the context of entrepreneurship, because I think for one, you can't sell anything, a product, an idea, a concept, without the ability to tell a story about it, about the why, about the mission. And I also came to understand as I advanced in my career that story is really just, story is about strategy, and strategy is really just a story well told. And if you can't tell your story, then perhaps you don't have a strategy. And I think, again, in unexpected ways, I found that background to be very, very formative. And I think story it's a bit of an overused word today, but it's essential. It's what binds us as humans. And I don't care what your major is, what you think your entrepreneur path is going to take you to. I guarantee you at the heart of what you do, it's going to be the ability to weave a story. That's how you sell what you make. That's how you get people to come and work with you, buy from you, partner with you. It starts with a story.
Was there anything specifically that made you realize that storytelling was kind of what you knew you were going to integrate into whatever you did? Was that kind of like a flash of insight, or was it a gradual thing over time that you
Definitely
realized?
a gradual. I mean, I gravitated to story because I liked it. So I think there was an interest there, but definitely it was an insight that revealed itself gradually over time. I think early in my career, I probably never would have called myself a storyteller. I probably didn't appreciate the ability that I had learned and cultivated. And working in media, a big chunk of my career was in media at NBC, but also CBS and CNN. And so I think just by osmosis, in some ways, I absorbed. I worked with storytellers, and I absorbed a lot of the how-to as almost an apprentice, if you will, and kind of an apprentice model. But for me, most of the things in my career have revealed themselves. I would love to tell you I had some master plan, and it was step A, B, C, and voila, you're vice chairman of GE. That doesn't happen that way. There was no grand plan, at least for me. Maybe some people have been fortunate, but I had to learn at each step along the way.
Kind of going off of that, what you just said, how did you kind of, like, what did the in-between period kind of look like from your William and Mary career? And I know you mentioned you had an internship at the Norfolk Public Radio. So what was that kind of transition period like before you got like your first big shot role?
Well, it was very scrappy and entrepreneurial. My first job right out of William and Mary was I went to Richmond and worked for a television news service. This is again, sort of dark ages, but think of it as C-SPAN for Virginia, and they covered the House of Delegates and Virginia legislature. And I was a roving reporter from the floor, and I was also a camera person, and I had to learn how to register the cameras and pack the cameras, and it was a very small group. And from there I went to a public access television station in Arlington, Virginia. If any of you have ever watched Wayne's World, another oldie, but that was what I did. And from there I went to NBC. And so it was a very scrappy existence. I mean, you're just trying to get experience, get your foot in the door, the old pay your dues kind of path, where it's about building your confidence, not just building your skills. Early on after William & Mary, I applied to every television station. I had no experience. I think I had a tape because there was a TV station at William & Mary that helped me. I did a little reporting there. But I was not confident, and that came through. Pretty quickly, as I said, I got behind the scenes. And by the time I ended up at NBC, I went to work at NBC in the news division in Washington, D.C., where I was living at the time. And I was a publicity coordinator. So I landed in the publicity department. One thing led to another. At the time, NBC was being acquired by GE. Pretty soon, my Washington-based publicity team, where there were 5, ended up being me and 2 interns. So it was one of those being at the right place at the right time, I guess. And unfortunately, there was some downsizing, and they went with more junior people, and I happened to be a more junior person and probably the right kind of salary. And then from there, they moved me to New York, and my career kind of took off from there.
Awesome. So when your career was kind of taking off, what did your role in co-founding Hulu look like? Like, what was the opportunity behind that? What was your role in that?
Okay, so I had worked my way through NBC. I had ended up as head of communications, and then got called to move to GE, where I got into more marketing and advertising, and then was brought back to NBC because in the few years I was at GE, I distinguished myself a bit, and the team I was with, we were leading change, and we did a big climate effort called Eco-Imagination that really helped the company and the industry. And so they're like, oh, Beth, I guess you like change. We'll send you back to NBC. We're worried about the future of digital media, so we need you to go back there. So I had been away from NBC maybe 8 years, and a lot had changed. I mean, I had changed. I had gotten more experience. The teams at NBC, like, they were owned by GE, but they could have cared less about the company. And for all they knew, I was making light bulbs off somewhere at GE. And I come back and they didn't really know what I had been doing. And so in some ways, it's like we all stopped. It's like we were 8 years earlier, and we thought of each other in a different dimension. But my job was to drive change. I had a very interesting job. It was digital media and traditional advertising sales. So it was a very schizophrenic job, but it was really about help the network, help the company figure out how to navigate this change with digital. I'll take you back in the Wayback Machine. YouTube was just coming on strong, hadn't even been bought by Google at the time. And there was something called MySpace that Fox had bought. And we were panicked at NBC. The future's happening and we're going to get left behind. We did an acquisition, the team I was leading, of a women's community called iVillage. It doesn't exist anymore. And it was not so successful because big company, small acquisition, we basically beat the life out of it. But out of that came a lot of great learning. And we looked around and we said, hey, we didn't do so well with this, but oh, by the way, Fox wasn't doing so well with MySpace. So it was a bit of panic, like, we don't know how to do this, let's partner. And so our teams got together and we seeded Hulu. What we knew we needed, because we were all company people and as entrepreneurial as my team and may have thought we were, we realized we needed a real entrepreneur to run this. So we went out and we hired Jason Kyler, who was really the founder of Hulu. So our team was the one that did the strategy, looked into the future, said streaming video is happening. Whether you like it or not, it's coming. This thing called Netflix. At the time, people were using it to ship DVDs in their mailbox, but it was named Netflix for a reason. Internet movies, internet flicks. It was happening. YouTube was growing up. And so we could see that program schedules were going to go away, that streaming video was going to happen, and we were going to be lost. So by partnering with Fox, we got the strategy, we had the vision, and that's what our teams did together. And then we had to find an entrepreneur to run it. And we had to set up I'm happy to answer questions about it. I won't go into it now, but we had to set up a whole series of constraints and ways to seed the future for Hulu, so the big companies that Fox and NBC wouldn't destroy Hulu. We had to set them up separately. We had to pay them a different kind of currency. We had to fund them in a different way. We had to take money from established networks, the team at Bravo or the team at NBC Sports were like, well, I should be getting that money. But no, it was going to something where the revenues weren't clear. The business model wasn't clear. So it was a lot of challenge of what happens in big companies when you try to seed new things and be entrepreneurial. But in this case, it worked. And really, it's in large part, I think the vision and strategy was good, but it's in large part because Jason and the entrepreneurial ethos he brought, and we were able to keep it very separate from the rest of the company.
Yeah, in this situation, you definitely were kind of in the forefront of change, especially if you're in media. And we've all seen how digital streaming services and things like that have really changed that platform. So in your book, Imagine It Forward, in short, it describes that we need to be ready for whatever emerges. We need to be courageous and committed to the power of change. And this at the EC is what we describe as a combination of grit and opportunity discovery. So can you kind of elaborate more on a specific time that you faced uncertainty or what it even means to try and face uncertainty?
Well, look, I think we've all felt this in the past 2 years. Think about what we've all lived through. It's been a good test of our ambiguity tolerance. Most people, myself included, don't like ambiguity, but it's a factor of life. One of the things that helped me sort of build a capability and find my path in a big company as an entrepreneur, as a marketer, was to be good at discovery. And I think I'll pass along a couple of tools that I developed that I think sort of answer that and maybe add to your EC toolkit. But partly I started off talking about this earlier. It's about curiosity. I was growing up in, NBC and GE as a marketer, and they're both became very technology focused and very product centric, and frankly very inward looking. And the opportunity was so clear to be outward looking, to take my title, to my marketing colleagues and myself, to take our job incredibly seriously, and to actually get outside, get out of the company and live in the markets where our customers were seeing change, where change was happening. And from there, you pretty quickly start to realize that certainly marketing is not just what you do at the end. It's not just a fun ad or a brochure. It's what you do at the beginning. It's where's the world going? Where are the markets going? What are the insights? So we had to shift our capabilities to be much more about the front end, the insights. And I think one critical question that if I leave you with anything, I think it's this: what problem are we trying to solve? And I think every entrepreneur has to have that in their toolkit. There's always a debate in companies. Does innovation happen because you had this great idea and you hoist it onto the world and they didn't know they wanted it? Or do you go from the market back and say the world has a problem, let's try to solve it? The answer is you need to do both. So too often in big companies, and this is where startups always excel, is they see a problem an incumbent didn't see. They see an opportunity where someone else didn't see it. And so the teams I worked with, we had to be really good at living outside the company, at starting to be good at pattern recognition, at discovery. So asking that question, what problem are we trying to solve? And then the other thing that emerges is that you have to be really good at that pattern recognition. And a tool I love that we developed, I mean, it's nothing fancy. It's nothing like you're going to get from McKinsey. It's just kind of school of hard knocks. I call it going on threes. It's just a simple tool. If you need 3 points to draw a line, 3 is kind of a magical number in a lot of ways. But I keep a notebook on my phone. I keep a little folder on my phone of interestingness. And when I'm out in discovery mode, which I think everyone should be at least a part of your day, of your week, I'm making note. Wow, that's interesting. Wow, let's say I'm walking around the campus of William & Mary and I notice everybody's wearing purple sneakers. Wow, I noticed that. So you have to be very observant. So I make a note, purple sneakers, William & Mary, what's going on? And I'm out in the world, and then maybe I go to Washington, D.C., and I notice everybody else is wearing purple sneakers, and I go, is this a coincidence? The third time let's say I'm in London and I see purple sneakers, I go, aha, I just declare it's a trend. Okay, I've seen it 3 times. Now the question is, why is that relevant? What's happening? Is that relevant to me, to my company? What can we learn about it? And that just became the move that I and my colleagues in marketing and innovation had to adopt. And it's a very entrepreneurial move. As I came to work in venture and work with a lot of founders, I remember one founder I was just delighted to get to know. He actually carried a little notebook around of problems. So every time he would encounter a problem that he or someone told him about, he wrote it down. Because again, to that question, what problem are we trying to solve? He wanted to just that was his way of discovering the world. So I think that those were a couple of things just to kind of put it in perspective of how to think about that.
Yeah, that's really great. And that's really excellent advice too. You're definitely practicing opportunity discovery. So kind of going off of that, based on your advice and your experience, which one of our pillars of entrepreneurial thinking do you think that you want to work on leveraging more from here on out?
Well, it's one I've struggled with my whole life. I think the failure pillar, the tolerance for failure, if you ask anyone, hey, if I were to stand there in person, I can see a few hands now, but raise your hand if you like failure. Well, maybe this is unfair because you guys are in the EC and it's something to work toward, but most people never raise their hand. They don't like failure, and anyone who says they do, I would challenge them because it feels horrible. And I think one of the challenges, and I found this a real struggle in a big company, especially part of the challenge I encountered at GE was I came in out of media. I was very much an oddball in a lot of ways. I was kind of the outsider inside, but I came from media. I was a marketer in a tech company. I was a woman in a largely male-dominated company. And so that, you kind of have this work. I landed in this company that was all about precision, and it was coming at the height of like Six Sigma, no defects. And trust me, you want that when you're riding in an amazing GE jet engine. No defects is great, but it's not good for innovation sometimes because in defects are where the learning happens. And so there have to be different modes and different ways to think about that. Obviously, something that's very critical, it's all about process and rigor and making sure it doesn't fail. But there's a lot of other things in business models and getting to a new product where you have to allow for failure. And the culture had kind of squeezed that instinct out of them. And so it made it harder. It makes it harder for me. And so that was part of our challenge, was to create, if you will, a third lane, even a second and a third lane that are about experimentation, about planting seeds in the next 3 to 5, and then the next 5 to 10 years. And in those areas, you are putting less money to work and you have longer horizons, but you're there to learn. Not everything's going to work. And almost like the farther out the opportunity is, the more failure has to happen before you feel confident about funding it. And one of the things I came to realize is that we just have to recast failure. And this sounds like a great talking point. It's really hard to do, but recast it by saying it's about learning. And so I really believe that for all of you, as you're building your career, I saw this in every company I've worked with. It's the same for a company as it is for a person. Speed to learning is a real competitive advantage. Your advantage in building your career, your advantage in building a company or a team inside of a company is going to be how quickly can we learn? How quickly can we learn before the competition? How quickly can we learn to help our customers move ahead? And the quicker you can learn, the better your services are going to be. And too often we don't frame it in that way. And so for myself, it's been humbling to, I'm a perfectionist. I always like the gold star. I went to William & Mary, for crying out loud. I mean, William & Mary doesn't take slackers. And so I think that's really hard to recast that a bit. And that's, so now I'm post working in a company. I do advising and board work and other things, but I've been really investing in myself, my portfolio of interests. I have very much a well-rounded life, of a portfolio life, and I'm still doing that. I have classes I take. I'm learning poetry. I'm an artist. I'm a nature conservationist, and I am very much like in third grade in many of these endeavors. And so constantly you have to put yourself in those situations where you have a beginner's mind, where you're learning again, where you're saying, I'll try better next time. This is an exercise. This is a step to learning. And so I guess my advice is take that with you. You're there at William & Mary, and in this rare, unique opportunity where it's all about learning. Don't leave it at William & Mary. This is what entrepreneurship is about in my mind. It's about learning. And it's about, once you stop learning, you stop growing, and companies fall when that happens.
Great. I'm so glad you chose failing wisely, because like you said, I feel like it seems like it's anti-William & Mary. So I think it's a really good one to choose. And I think there's a lot to unpack there, but I do want to give everyone the opportunity to ask questions. So if you're here with us in person, you're welcome to just raise your hand and I'll call on you and you can introduce yourself, ask your question. And if you're online, you can just raise your hand as well and I can call on you. So you can go ahead and get started with questions.
Thank you, Savannah.
Any questions? Oh, Yes.
So I had one. Earlier you were talking about how like it's important that you're observant and about like the purple sneakers analogy. And I was just wondering if you had any other examples of how you being observant helped you in your career to get ahead of your incumbents.
Yeah, well, I'd say one of the things I'm still proudest of in my career, and I mentioned it briefly, is just how I was part of a team that really helped GE early kind of define a future around clean technology, getting us into wind power, solar power, battery storage, a host of other things. Now, did we do it fast enough, big enough at the time? No. It was risky. Customers felt nervous. But we spent like a year in discovery mode with our customers, with some of our most advanced customers, our most risk taking customers, and there was no denying this trend was real. And it was also helpful that the chairman and CEO of the company, Jeff Immelt, believed it as well. He saw from customers that they had a problem. They were saying, help us. We see fossil fuels are not forever. We want to get ahead of this. We don't want regulation to force us. We don't want to go broke doing it. Don't make crazy technology that we can't afford. Help us. And so by listening and seeing, we were able to put that together. Now, as I said, it's taken 10 to 15 years for some of this to play out. Unfortunately, I wish big companies had acted faster and bigger, but that's also a challenge in companies, is getting to scale when things are still somewhat nascent. That's one. I mean, I talked about streaming digital media was another one that was so clear, but not clear enough. I mean, here's the thing. It's like, it would be easy for me to sit here and say, oh, we were so brilliant. We saw the future. We should be given some prize. We're futurists. That's not true at all. The future's unfolding. You have to go meet it. Change is out there. You have to go find it. And you don't always get it right, but these patterns are there. The world's evolving and emerging. It's not like you have a crystal ball or you have some divine insight. It's happening if you pick your head up and look. And too often, in especially established institutions, whether it's a college or a company, we get myopia. We just look here. We've got quarterly earnings. We've got semesters. We've got grades, whatever. And we don't pick our head up and start to understand. And we don't talk to enough people. We don't look at enough of the problems. So maybe because of your question, I'll give you another little thought experiment. I mean, for everyone there, think back, 5 years ago, 8 years ago, things that you thought seemed laughable or silly, like they were emerging, and you're like, ha ha ha, this is never going to take off. This is so absurd. I don't want to put anyone on the spot, but maybe who asked the question? I'm sorry I missed your name, but you want to answer that? What do you think of when I ask you that question?
Yeah, my name is Melody, and I think the first thing that probably comes to mind is the app TikTok. Like, I remember a few years ago, a lot of my friends thought it was like really cringy or embarrassing of people who used it. And then like over recently, it's become like one of the biggest platforms that like younger people use.
Exactly. That's such a great example, Melody. It's such a great example. And the laughing, the hysteria. I mean, I think back eight years, maybe getting in the car with a stranger before there was Uber or Lyft. I mean, these are again things. I mean, legalized marijuana, on and on and on. And so that's a good exercise. So now, Melody, you don't have to, I'm not going to put you on the spot again, but think for all of you, take Melody's cue for TikTok and think forward. What are the things in 5 years that right now seem kind of silly? Obviously, you see everybody going crazy on crypto and NFTs, and who knows where that's going to shape out, but something's going to happen. But what's the next thing? And this is where you just start to have to be good at finding those things, just even in yourself, to be open to that, to be open to saying, what if that's not crazy? What if that does take off? And it probably won't take off the way you think it will, but there are going to be a lot of people experimenting. I mean, look at crypto. I think it's a great example of all the money that's been won and lost and, craziness. Something's going to shake out in the next 10 years. We don't know exactly what, but on one hand, we're not going to be surprised. On the other hand, we're going to be surprised. So anyway, I'll let more of you talk. So anyway, thanks, Melody.
Augustin, do you have a question?
Yeah, hi. Thank you very much for coming and talking to us today. I really appreciate your time. You're talking about, shifting landscapes in multiple industries and how, one of your strengths has been to kind of pay attention, listen to other people when they pay attention and bring up some of these details ahead of time, and then try to make early moves to take advantage of the landscapes. Obviously, Hulu, you talked about clean energy initiatives, but, what was your strategy when you were dealing with, clear indicators that things were going to shift in a certain direction, right? And so, an unknown landscape, plenty of opportunity, and you can never know for sure. But when you were trying to then act on some kind of initiative based off of that data or those precursor tells, and you ran into kind of people who wanted to obstruct or bury their head in the sand or didn't want to accept that the landscape was shifting, right? So how did you work around people maybe within your team or opposing factors at different companies that you worked at?
Augustin, I've never had that happen. I don't know what you're talking about. It's every day of that. I think that is, talk about the innovator's dilemma and all the Clay Christensen phrases. And that is the innovator's dilemma in an established company, even in a VC firm. I mean, wherever your entrepreneurial career takes you, you're going to have that. And so there are a couple of ways. There's a personal way to think about it, Augustin, and then there's a or do you go by Augie? I'm sorry, Augie.
Yeah, no, sorry. I didn't introduce myself. I'm Augie O'Connell, and I had to change my name. Sorry about that.
Okay, Augie, sorry. So let's start with kind of the personal level. Like, first of all, you can't take it personally. I mean, I'd be part of a team, we'd see something, we're like a golden retriever. We bring it back in our mouth, we drop it at the feet of people, and they're like, ooh, this ugly rat. What am I going to do with it? And in some respects, it's new, it's ugly, it's unknown. You can't expect people to immediately embrace this ugly thing and go, this is the future. I love it. I love it. I love it. They don't do that. So you have to has to be this kind of confidence check within you and your team where you're like, I've done my homework. I know this is happening. We've talked to enough people. We see it. There's an intuition. So there's a confidence. Can't be overconfident because you don't know everything at that point. And I think for myself, it was just this kind of mindset shift where I had to say, you say no, but I hear something different. So I hear you saying, oh, not yet. Oh, you mean not yet. You say no, but you really mean not yet, Augie. You don't know that that's what you mean. And so I got to find another way to come back. When I was at NBC, one of the earlier times, we had this amazing vision. We wanted to do the NBC Experience Store. It was at the time when the Today Show opened its studio, outdoor, window on the world. And we're like, we at the time I was overseeing the Page program. We wanted to do a whole behind the scenes of NBC and then have this big extravaganza commercial experience. Well, our team thought we were brilliant and we had this brilliant vision. We took it to Bob Wright, the head of the network, and he's like, no, the CFO hated it. The returns weren't good enough. Second time we came back, we went and studied all these other things. The idea got even better. Bob said no. Third time, we had built a little diorama. I mean, it was amazing. We came back and Bob looked at me and he said, look, I wanted to say no, but you made it so darn hard. The answer is yes. But yes, but I realized he was testing me. He was testing us. And so that's really my question. How passionate are you in the idea that you have? So no is not yet. I had to go back to Bob 3 times. There was one idea I had at GE and trying to drive sort of consumer health. And it took me 6 years and a bunch of different colleagues to get that launch. So that was critical, that tenacity that you don't even know you have. It's not about your idea. And there's a couple of other things in that, because often you may be the wrong person to bring that forward. Maybe you're not telling the story well enough. Maybe you don't have the credibility or the expertise. So you have to build a team that also believes that sees different ways. And sometimes you have to give that quote idea, your baby idea, away to someone else who may be seen in a better light than you to take it forward. So it's a lot of those kinds of things. And then lastly, I think one of the things that helped me a lot when I came to the point where I had oversight of a team and budget was constantly thinking about that experimental lane. And I didn't ask the CFO for permission. I knew what our numbers were expected to be. I knew what our budget was. And every time I would try to carve out, depending on the budget cycle, 5 to 10 to 15% of our money, our time, our resources to experiment in some of these what's new and next things. Frankly, we became a fun place to work. Our team, we had each other's back. Now, of course, I didn't tee up the duds and I didn't tee up the things that were too early, but out of that success, we started to feel confident about ourselves. And look, you don't have to have a budget. It can be your mind share. It can be the amount of time you spend in your day. You can have a team of just yourself and this still works. So hopefully, Augie, those are helpful. But yeah, look, there's always a gatekeeper. I've never been in any company, industry, and startups sometimes are the worst. These gatekeepers who are like, no, you cannot pass here. No, we don't do it that way here. No, we tried it in 1952 and we're never going to do that again. You just have to go, I think you're saying not yet. I got to find a different way in. I got to come back. I got to keep working it.
Yeah, no, I love that. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Sure.
So I also got a direct message question, and this person asked, Beth talked about the importance of stories, but in companies, people often struggle to articulate a story that will truly resonate. Do you have any suggestions about steps to work through in developing a story?
Yeah, I love this question. So to me, again, I hesitate. I haven't found a better word. I mean, story is story. And everywhere you go these days, people are, it's about the story. I'm a storyteller. We're all storytellers. But so here to me is what a good story is. It says, what problem am I trying to solve? So I've already made that clear. But it says, where are we going? Where are we going in the world? So there's a vision. I see something. I see clean energy. I see a crypto future. Whatever you see, then the next part of this, so you have to be able to articulate, here's where we're going. Here's what we see. And it has to be, somewhat relatable. It has to say, why us? Why am I the one to do this? Why are we the ones to do this? It speaks to your capability. It speaks to your passion. It speaks to your history. And I think this is often something that people are afraid of telling. I mean, certainly we're all here as part of William & Mary, one of the oldest institutions of education. Its legacy makes it who it is. And so where you came from, the fact that I'm a small town girl in the Shenandoah Valley, that's part of my story. I grew up with a really amazing sense of community and sense of everybody knows your name. And that carried me all the way around the world. That's part of my story. And I have to be willing to embrace that and share that. And finally, the last thing about story, and this is often the hardest, is it doesn't have to be true yet. And before you write me off as like a fake news person or, oh, there you go, some crazy marketer, it's about your aspiration. Here's where we're going. Like, we're not there yet. Help me, help us, come join the team. Buy from us so we can help get there. Let's build this together. So a lot of it is we're building this together. And with that comes what Savannah and I were talking about. Often as part of your stories, there will be missteps and failures. And that also makes a really good story to say, we didn't get it right. And here's what we learned. Here's what we're going to fix about that. So anyway, hopefully that was helpful. I mean, just to summarize, I think story is really just, who are you? Where are you going in the world? Why you? Where did you come from? And why should I join you? And I think if you can kind of answer that, in marketing, we talk about what's your unique value proposition, your unique selling proposition. Every one of us has that. And sometimes it takes you years to figure it out. But imagine you get on an elevator with a future funder or a future employer, and they're going to want to know, hey, Savannah, what's your story? So that's maybe a homework assignment for everyone here. If I were to come to campus in a couple of months and I find Augie or Melody or Savannah and I stop you and I go, oh, Augie, what's your story? Do you have one? What are you going to say to me? So that's a bit of a thought experiment for you as well.
Yes.
Hi, I'm Paulina. I know you spoke a bit about failure and how you kind of want to just learn fast. I was wondering if you could give a specific example of a time that you failed and what you learned from it.
Well, okay. I've been married. I'm in my second marriage, so I failed the first time on that one. That was a big one. So that's a personal example. I raised two daughters. They turned out great, but they would tell you I was hardly a perfect parent. I'm sure my husband would tell you I'm hardly a perfect wife. So, I mean, I think those are just living things. In my business career, I mean, we talked about, I made it sound like, oh, we were so great at NBC Digital. We launched Hulu. We were so successful. But we acquired iVillage for $600 million, which was a lot at the time. And the company, a lot of us proceeded to just squeeze the life out of it. That did not take off. There were several times when in the course of my career in this kind of experimental and innovation lane, backed companies to the tune of tens of millions of dollars that didn't work out and had to go before my colleagues, the CFO, and say, this failed, this company's gone bankrupt. There was a company I seeded within the context of GE, and for like a year we didn't make our numbers, and you walk in and everybody thinks you've got like a big loser sign on your forehead. It's almost like you smell bad. They don't want to sit next to you because they don't want it to rub off. So, I mean, there are countless numbers of those stories of thinking an idea is great, taking chances or not taking chances on people. So, I mean, I could give you millions of them, but it's hard. Here's what I learned about the things that don't work is that it's okay to kind of suck your thumb for a little while. You had a lot of hope for that. You have to sort of go through a period of mourning for that lost idea, opportunity. There are jobs I wanted, I didn't get. It's okay to feel bad about it. But you can't feel bad about it forever and hold a grudge. So suck your thumb for a little while and then kind of take a pulse. What did I learn? What kind of feedback can other people give me about it? Oftentimes, I mentioned that one of the companies I backed went bankrupt. And oh my God, it was so horrible. I thought I might get fired out of it. But I love that one of the companies we seeded at GE is doing great now because of the learnings out of that bankruptcy 8 years ago. And I love it. I love it. It's an appliance, it has a whole new business unit. The GE Appliances launched. And so sometimes it takes you 10 years to learn and see the learnings of those seeds of failure. So you also have to have a bit of a long-term perspective.
Thank you.
Hi, Beth. My name is Katie. So speaking to your role as an environmentalist, I think there's like a really big space for entrepreneurship within a lot of the environmental struggles we're going through. For example, I know in Houston right now, a lot of the old school oil and gas companies are kind of reimagining fracking technologies and how that can actually be used to harness energy. Are there any exciting environmental projects that you're working on or excited about, interested in?
Yeah, I've been advising an environmental investment group. We've invested and seeded some things happening in more near-term technologies like electric vehicle charging. I think that's at a really interesting tipping point. I'm really intrigued about what's happening in agriculture. A lot of time I'm spending personally is on rewilding and forest regeneration. So there's a lot of work happening now in sustainable agriculture, mushrooms, using trees are your like amazing carbon banks, reforestation. There's some interesting technologies coming into fighting, the horrible fire burns that are happening across many of our forests. There's so I see a lot of great entrepreneurship happening. The challenge for a lot of these technologies is they take time and money, and the problems are super pressing right now. But I will tell you a huge shift. When I was doing climate work at GE, investors and customers were hard sell in the beginning. Investors still are a bit of a hard sell, but you're seeing great VC firms focused on that, public markets starting to get there. So I think it is a good time, and it's only going to get better. So yeah, if I were starting over today, or if I were starting today in a career, I definitely would be looking at nature-based or some sort of environmental climate focus, with the knowledge that more money is flowing to fund that future.
Thank you.
Miles, would you like to ask your question?
Yeah, so thanks for coming today. This is a great opportunity. I kind of have two questions. So one, what are some of the common mistakes that people make when telling stories, and how do you sort of rectify those and get around that? And two, earlier you talked about the velocity of learning and how it's, you always want to learn faster than your competitors, of course, but always trying to speed up your learning process to learn even more and change and make any tweaks that you need to. So have you found anything to be particularly effective to increase your velocity of learning, or anything that a lot of people do that sort of slows them down in that regard?
Yeah, those are two great questions. So on story, the common mistakes that people make, was that your first question? Yeah. So I think it's a couple of things. I think people assume we're too close to it. If the story's about us, our product, our company, we've been living with it, and we assume everybody else gets it. And so we don't have a feedback loop to understand if our story's resonating. I'm a big believer on feedback loops. I hope all of you are learning this as part of your entrepreneurial education there. I find one simple question is a really hard question, but tell me something I don't want to hear. And that's a really good question. And so when you're building your story, you're too close to it. You need to pulse other people. Is this clear? Does this make sense? Now, that being said, you still have to tell the story your way. I mean, just because somebody's like, I don't like it, but it's my story. What about it you don't like? So I'm not saying listen to the feedback always. Be informed by the feedback to help you make your decision. And I think it's really important. The second part of that is just communicate. You think, yeah, but I told you that story, but you didn't tell it to me 15 times. You didn't tell it to me 3,000 times. And so you have to keep finding your enthusiasm and keep relating and telling that story. And then the last thing is that often stories are exclusionary. It's like, we're with the in crowd and you just don't get it, do you? Part of the time when I was at NBC and doing the Hulu and digital work, I mean, that was another time I almost got fired because we became warring tribes. It was the digital forging the future and the kind of Luddites in the broadcast network who were going to be left behind. And we were building a story that wasn't inclusive. And people were afraid of it. They were afraid of that. So sometimes, especially if you're building a story that's taking you to the future, I think we're seeing this in our society writ large right now. The pace of change and technology is scaring people. They want to go back to a comfort level. And it's often because they don't feel included. And so in change, often you have to give people a kind of way to find their way forward. So let's just imagine you were introducing a new product or a new way of using technology at William & Mary. One of the ways you'd get people to experience that, to know that story, is to experience it. You see people setting up like innovation labs or hands-on ways that people can start to see it. So there may be different ways you have to tell the story or have the story experienced for people to get it. And they have to have kind of the room to do that. So all that, and then I'm sorry, Miles, now I forgot your second question because I babbled too much. What was your second question?
The second question was about the velocity of learning that you spoke about earlier, how to increase it and how to prevent, slowing it down.
Yeah, I'm probably going to be speaking a bit contradictory here because I do think the pace of change in the world is so fast. Sometimes you have to slow down to speed up. And so that's kind of my message to you is it's not just velocity of learning. It's the step backs to be able to go faster. So that step back is often a failure. That experiment didn't work. What I thought was going to happen didn't. I tried that and it was a resounding dud. That is a going slow to go fast. Well, I learned that. Somebody else is over there thinking that's going to work, but I've learned it doesn't. So already I'm faster along. So I'm kind of speaking a bit contradictory there, Miles. Is sort of, it's not always just about speed. A setback is actually a learning that I think is going to take you forward in a way you may not always be able to appreciate it at the time. That's really the point I was trying to make. But I do think speed to learning, just while we're on it, I think back to where we started in this pillar at the EC, just discovery, discovery, discovery. The more you get out and learn, and it's experiential, the more you see for yourself, go see for yourself. I mean, yeah, you have to read things, watch things, see things, but seeing for yourself, going there, especially to where things are weird and strange. If you can't go weird, you're not going to be an entrepreneur. You have to be willing to go weird. And that's going to speed your learning because you're going to see things that challenge you.
Great. I think that is all the time that we have for questions, because I know you have a hard stop coming up, Beth, but I just want to thank you again so much for dedicating your time with us today. We're going to go ahead and let you go before I give some wrap-up announcements to everyone, but thank you so much for dedicating your time and your insight and your advice to us. It really has been an honor to have you here with us again.
Great. My honor to spend time with all of you. Thanks for the opportunity. Hopefully some of this was helpful. And you're there because you have a passion for entrepreneurism. And I think the world needs you. The world needs you to solve some big problems. So go get them. I'll be cheering you on. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.